I'm just going to give you a little bit of education here on biochemistry. So the only thing that separates men from women is one enzyme. And so I'm bringing that up because it's really interesting how that happened, and the Romans actually figured it out. And so from testosterone to estrogen is an enzyme called, does anybody know what it's called? It's fascinating. It's called 17 aromatase. So, yeah, so amoritase is what they use. So it's
What's my middle name?
amor. So amor means in Latin is love. And so, they just figured out that there was a difference. So that's an enzyme. So that's how reactions occur. And so the reason I got really interested in EHT is because my family has a long history of Alzheimer's. My mom died of Alzheimer's and my brother just died of Alzheimer's. And so, it's starting to affect people earlier and earlier. We don't really have a good reason for that other than what we call, and I put it right here, amyloid burden. And so that sounds like a big word. Amyloid, though, is the protein that actually causes the brain to become tangled with these tau proteins. And tau proteins are bad. So what happens is these tau proteins build up in the neurofibrillary areas of your brain. And there's two areas of your brain that have really become affected by this. And the first one is learning and thinking. And so your learning and thinking is one part of your brain, and then the memory and retaining of the information is in the front part of your brain. And so within the last, like Jennifer said, within the last probably 20 years, we've really been able to dig into these things molecularly, which is very, very small levels of basically amino acids. Amino acids are, you'll see them in the health food store, like aspartame and tryptophan and things like that. Those are amino acids, and there's 23 amino acids. And amino acids, what they do is they actually make the DNA. So if you see guanine or tyrosine or anything like that, those are made up of amino acids. And so what happens is, just like in cancer, when something, a gene becomes errant or misbehaves, it makes copies of itself. And that's what Jennifer is referring to, is we've been able to figure out how those things work because we took the genes and we mapped the human genome. And so as time, you probably heard about that. It was a long time ago, but I mean, it was really a revolutionary breakthrough in cancer research and neuro research. And really the focus, if you've noticed, consumer ads in the latest on TV for drugs, it's mostly now cancer and autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid. And then also, you've seen the big one. I mean, it's there's a lot of drugs for like Alzheimer's that you'll see that are actually being now pushed towards consumer advertising. So that's basically the brain in a nutshell and what people are doing. And so now people are really focused on two things. One being gene manipulation, which is cancer research, and the other one is neuro. And so we know what causes the problem with Alzheimer's and dementia. And Alzheimer's is that's like a broad category, but the bottom line is it's just these protein tangles that get crazy. And so this particular picture right here that I drew was, this is the cell membrane. And what happens is fat protects us. And so this lipophosphate acid, this LPA here, drops down and goes to another enzyme, and it converts into this bad enzyme, and there's tau proteins. This is how tau proteins are started to be made right here. And it's gamma glutamine. But what EHT is, and I wrote it out for you, it's eicosanoyl hydroxy exratryptic acid, or sorry, not acid, but tryptamine. So it's basically, that's a big word for coffee. They actually extracted it from coffee, so it's one of the extractions from coffee. And there could be many extractions from coffee, but this is the one that they studied. And so EHT, what EHT does is goes in here and it blocks, just kind of like this reaction, but this reaction actually makes it happen. This reaction actually reduces it. So what you're looking for and what people are looking for is a way to reduce the amount of proteins that we get in our brain that actually make copies of the tau protein. And so when I said amyloid burden, the reason that occurs is because that gene, which is this one right here, gets turned on and starts making copies. It's just like a printer or copier in your brain. It just starts making copies of that stuff. And so that's why when you think about people with dementia, if you've ever been associated, everybody probably here knows somebody with dementia, it's a progressive disease. And it's progressive because it starts out and you go, well, I can't remember names, or I can't remember. And I noticed myself, I'm 59, and I've been taking it now for about a year, I guess, a little over a year, that I had to rely on my phone more for my drugs than I ever had. And so I would have to look the drugs up, which is not like me. I would call it, I have a toolbox in my head for stuff that I use in the ER. And the drugs, I have like 20 drugs that I write all the time. It's just like, it was really just repetitive. But then I started forgetting what the dosages were and things like that. So that's how I knew when you say, how do you quantify those things? Because that's what's really science is how do you quantify, how do you know it's working? You know, I'm sitting here paying for this pill, and how do you know it's working? And I think we've all been to the health food store and said, oh, I'm going to take something to make me lose weight, or I'm going to take something to make me feel better. And you take it, and you're like, well, I don't really feel it any different. But you got to be able to quantify, and science is quantifying. Now, this isn't FDA approved because the FDA really hasn't gotten into these yet, but they will eventually, because this is a new area of science, which is neuroscience, that's becoming more and more prevalent because people don't want to get Alzheimer's. So it's not curative, but it's protective is what we're trying to do. So these are the things that are protective. And EHT seems to be protective, and it is actually, and Jennifer has a paper here that's researched by the people at Princeton who did the study, that it's a protective. And the question is, you know, when do you start taking it? And the earlier you start taking it, the better off you are, because then you don't start making copies of this, and you don't get it in your brain. Everybody's heard about CTE, and probably if you follow the football players, you know, there's this new study out that says that the more head injuries that you get, the more you lose your memory, which is really true. Call it punch drunk, or boxer's brain. And so they're doing studies on that now to see how they can see if these kind of things can be protective. But those are more trauma related than they are actually DNA related. And so the thing that they've really done here that we did back in the day was we isolated the chromosome. You know, you have 23 chromosomes in your body, and so this is chromosome 17 is the one that's effective or is affected by tau proteins. And so they isolated that and figured out how to come up with the tau protein. That wasn't Princeton. That was done a long time ago with the Human Genome Project. So anyway, basically, if you sell it to somebody, you're selling what is a protective component for dementia and a progressive disease.
Thank you, Marie.
Wow, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I do.
Go ahead.
Does it help protect like the myelin sheath? What is it actually doing?
So that's a good question. So what it does is it actually stops the reaction from occurring. So what it does
It's like
is
a protective coat.
it actually keeps this reaction. It's this reaction here. This is I wrote it right here. This is a catalyst. So this catalyst, if you have reactions, amino acids is what usually are the reactions. So one amino acid goes to another amino acid by reacting. And so this one, this actually will stimulate it. This actually inhibits it. So there's two types of reactions in your body. There's inhibition and stimulation. And so this is an inhibitor of this particular reaction that causes the tau protein. So it actually inhibits the production of those tau proteins.
But does nothing to the ones that have already reproduced.
No. There's if you have, and there's electron microscopy picture in there of the tangles, and they're called microtubules, and they're wound. It's just like a thread, basically. The longer they get, the more they can wrap around each other. And so that's what the electron microscopy does. I mean, I can get really, but you can get longer and longer and longer. So if you have yarn, and you can make tangles, that's what it does. So the shorter the microtubules, the better it is. So you're cleaving that reaction before it continues. And so as these reactions spin, which is basically what it's doing, making copies. But it's making copies, so it's not one piece of paper at a time, it's links at a time with microtubules. And so it's stopping that microtubule from actually developing into a longer strand so it can weave its way around, and that's why they call it tangle.
Right.
Can I ask everyone in the room who has dementia or Alzheimer's in their family? Anybody here that's close? Okay.
Yeah.
So if there's someone who's, my boyfriend's dad is in his 80s and he's pretty much done.
Yeah.
Is there any way, of taking this where it could slow it down or anything?
I haven't seen the data on that. I don't think they've done data as far as there are drugs that they say do that. There's a couple of drugs on the market that I've actually used. I gave to my mom. I had real knowledge of this because I gave it to my mom. And what they say it does is it will buy 6 months of independent living. But if you're that, if you're that progressed, then probably not.
Okay.
So I think anybody who says that they can reverse it is not, that's not really factual. I don't think you can't really reverse it. That's not going to happen. And that's the other thing, if you think about it, in 100 years ago, we lived to be 54 years old was the average lifespan. And now I think the average white woman lives to be 79.5, something like that. So, we're seeing more. Everybody's like, why do we have it so much? And that's one of the questions, and that's what they're researching. But one of the reasons for sure is because we have more time for things to go wrong.
Is it, since it's to do with the C17 or whatever, is it more genetic that this is happening? So if you have it in your family, like breast cancer, so a certain kind of breast cancer, if you're a woman, you're have more propensity to get that. So if you have Alzheimer's or dementia in your family, how does that play out in the younger generations?
Well, the answer is we don't know. And the reason we don't know is because how do you do a study? How do you tell a bunch of people that can't remember to come to a group?
Post-mortem as they take.
Right. So the only way that we know is like CTE and stuff is post-mortem. So people are dead and you do an autopsy on their brain. But that's what, and this area has really exploded for a number of reasons. One, because it's in the limelight publicly because of the NFL, and also because people are, when you talk about people in nursing homes, the nursing homes are filling up with people that have dementia. And so we see it more and more and more with people, coming into nursing homes, not with physical problems, but with mental problems. That was my mom. My mom exercised all the way up until she was 80 years old. And she exercised just about every day. She was in fantastic shape. And I say this tongue in cheek, but that's one argument is my mom for not taking care of yourself physically, because she lived another 10, almost 11 years in great shape, but she couldn't remember her name. She couldn't remember to eat. She couldn't remember to turn off the, so I took care of her for a long time. And then my brother became actually the same way. So I know it exists in my family, and even though there's not data, our question was, how do we know? There's no data that says it's genetic, but that amyloid burden, there's just more people that make more copies of more genes than other people.
Do